Hey, good morning and welcome to the CDBG Grant Administration Manual Training Series. My name is Rosie Goldich and I'm the CDBG Coordinator and the Community MT Division of the Montana Department of Commerce. During this presentation, we will be discussing the Environmental Review Chapter and Toolkit and the URA Chapter and Toolkit. Just a couple of housekeeping notes. First, these presentations are recorded and they will be available on our website shortly after the series has concluded. You can find these slides on our Grant Administration Manual on our website, commerce.mt.gov. Select the Infrastructure and Planning tab at the top, then select Community Development Block Grant Program. The CDBG Manual link will be found on the left-hand side of the screen. Please save all questions until the end of the presentation. We will have allotted time for them. And now Stephanie is walking us through where to find the Grant Admin Manual and all the associated chapters, as well as the toolkits and guidance. Thank you. First, I will be reviewing the updates and key points of the Environmental Review chapter. One of the primary updates to this chapter is the Words to Know section, which covers a variety of terms associated with the CDBG Environmental Review. These definitions will help inform grantees and grant administrators of environmental review requirements and ensure the success of the environmental review process. The words to know that are included in the chapter are the following: 24 CFR Part 58, which is the section of code of federal regulation that covers the environmental review process for the state CDBG program, choice limiting actions, environmental assessment, environmental certifying officer, environmental review record. Next slide. Montana Environmental Policy Act, National Environmental Policy Act, responsible entity, statutory checklist, and subrecipient. If you are unclear about the words to know or want deeper understanding of how they are relevant to your project, please contact your project specialist. Next slide. As previously stated, the chapter begins with the words to know list. The next section encompasses the environmental review process and walks the reader through each particular step of completing the environmental review record. The first step of determining the level of review is based on the entire scope of the project. These levels of review include exempt, categorically excluded, not subject to Part 58, categorically excluded, subject to Part 58, environmental assessment, tiered reviews, and an environmental impact statement. Please note, if you believe that your project requires an EIS or environmental impact statement level of review, please contact your project specialist before proceeding. The next two steps are deciding who will complete the environmental review based on capacity, expertise of the work, and involved and appropriateness. That individual is the environmental certifying officer and must be confirmed as the ECO using a resolution signed by the grantee. A sample of this resolution can be found in the Environmental Review Toolkit. After an ECO is selected, the next step is to complete the appropriate statutory checklist. These checklists, along with guidance documents, can be found in the toolkit. Shortly, I will show an example of a checklist and the associated guidance documents. When the statutory checklist has been completed, the next step is to submit the appropriate checklist and backup documentation for Commerce approval. Once that has been completed, the chapter details the public participation requirements for the appropriate level of review. One update from the previous environmental review chapter is the new public participation schedule, which we will review in a moment. After the public participation requirements are met and any comments have been received, positive or negative, the environmental review chapter lists the necessary materials of the environmental review record, including the resolution authorizing the ECO, the completed statutory checklist, all supporting documentation, proof of publication, and any potential public comments. Next slide. On page 8 of the environmental review chapter, 2 calendars are included to guide the grantee through the public engagement portion of the environmental review. On the left, you will see the categorically excluded subject to Part 58.5 Notice of Intent Request for Release of Funds calendar. On the left is the environmental assessment combined finding of no significant impact Notice of Intent Request for Release of Funds calendar. Grantees are strongly encouraged to fill in this calendar while in the environmental review process in order to meet public engagement regulations. Next slide. Now we will move into the toolkit portion of the environmental review. Next slide. The first document in the environmental review toolkit is the environmental review training. This simple presentation outlines important aspects, including but not limited to choice limiting actions, levels of review, the specific project activities that fall under each level of review, and how to complete a tiered level of review. As always, work very closely with your project specialist to ensure the success and completion of your environmental review. Next slide. This document includes all of the HUD partner worksheets. Each of these worksheets walks the grantee through each of the topics that are found on the categorically excluded subject to Part 58 in environmental assessment review checklist. These are not required worksheets. However, they can be incredibly helpful for the grantee if they are unclear about the level of impact a topic might have on their project by walking the grantee through a series of questions. As you can see at the top of the airport hazards and flood insurance worksheets, they also include any relevant legislation or regulation for further research if necessary. These worksheets also assist the grantee with any of the required documentation and backup documentation that will be a part of the environmental review record. Next slide. In this toolkit, we have included 3 guidance documents for assisting grantees with completing the environmental review checklist associated with their project. You can tell the difference between the guidance documents and the official checklist due to the highlighted text on this guidance page. This additional highlighted language will assist the grantee administrator or grantee with providing all the necessary information on the environmental review record. If you have any questions about any statements made on these guidance documents, please contact your project specialist for more information. Next slide. These 2 forms are the HUD 7015.15 and 7015.16 forms. On the left, the 7015.15 form is sent from the grantee to Commerce to request the release of funds. If you have questions on how to fill this form out or need additional details, please contact your project specialist. On the right-hand side is a 7015.16 form or the Authority to Use Grant Funds form. This will be sent from Commerce at the end of the environmental review public comment period to inform the grantee that they are now allowed to submit a request for reimbursement. This document is signed by the Department of Commerce and will need to be kept on file by the grantee. For those of you who have previously completed an environmental review, the 7015.16 form is currently replacing the environmental release of funds letter originally sent from Commerce. Next slide. The environmental review toolkit has a variety of tools associated to ensure the success of your review. If you have questions or there are items that were in the previous environmental review toolkit that are missing from this one, please let me know. As always, working closely with your project specialist throughout this process will ensure timeliness is met and regulations are followed. And now we will be transitioning to the URA portion of this presentation. Once again, I do want to remind everyone that we will have time for questions at the end. Next slide. There are several key points in the URA chapter. The first, as previously stated from other presentations, is the words to know. In the URA chapter, the words to know are the following: acquisition, displacement, GIN or general information notice, and relocation. The chapter then continues to the overview section, which details all the details about URA, including Section 104D of the Housing and Community Development Act, and also provides flowcharts and other details about the process of URA. There's also the acquisition section, which details out grantee responsibilities and the difference between voluntary acquisitions and involuntary acquisitions and the process for both. Next slide. In the relocation section, one of the key points is the general URA relocation process. The next is avoiding displacement, which details out how the grantee can avoid displacing individuals. Temporary relocation, permanent displacement, the record-keeping requirements with the URA, and applicable requirements, which includes details about citations and different federal regulations associated with the URA. Next slide. There are several flowcharts within the URA chapter. On the left, you'll see the general URA flowchart, which allows the grantee to decide what level of displacement or potential relocation their project will have an impact on. This also determines if federal funds are included in the project and what activities might be URA applicable or not URA applicable. On the right-hand side, there are two flowcharts determining the voluntary acquisition flowchart and the involuntary acquisition flowchart. Next slide. The first document in the URA toolkit is also titled the URA toolkit. Within this document, there are several samples that you can use to determine your URA process. The first is the written offer to purchase, statement of the basis of determination of just compensation, a sample public invitation for acquisition of real property, the donation of real property, a sample letter of donation of property by the owner, final offer before initiating condemnation procedures, condemnation proceedings, and the final notice to acquire by negotiation. Next slide. Also found in the URA toolkit is the HUD General Information Notice residential tenant to be displaced. As you can see here on the right-hand side, is a sample of that letter. The grantee will fill in the appropriate information on the General Information Notice if they feel that residential tenants will be displaced during the course of their project. Next slide. We also include 3 modules from the URA, the HUD Way toolkit. The first module is an overview. The second is more detailed about Section 104D of the Housing and Community Development Act of 1974. And the Module 7 is a temporary relocation summary. These can all be found in the URA toolkit in the manual. Next slide. And that concludes the environmental review and URA presentation. If you have any questions regarding the environmental review chapter or toolkit or the URA chapter and toolkit, please raise your hand and a presenter will unmute you. Thank you. Okay, if there are no questions, at this time, my contact information is on the screen, and so if you come up with a question later, you can always email or call me. Thank you so much for joining this morning. Our next presentation will be on the project monitoring and closeout chapter and toolkit. And that will be starting at 10:45 a.m. Thank you.